Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mike here at Game from Scratch, and today we are talking about Apple. And we are not talking about Apple in a good way, but we are talking about Apple and some of the relationships with developers. And let's just say Apple hasn't had a wonderful week when it comes to developer relationships. And that's what we're going to look at today. And the funny thing is, this is when they can probably least afford to do so. This year, WWDC, the Worldwide Developer Conference for Apple products, is going fully online. It starts on June the 22nd, and this is when Apple basically tries to convince developers that their platform is the platform to develop for. And over the last, let's say, year and a half, 2 years, their relationship with developers, especially with game developers, has been a little strained, I guess we could say, because we got a couple of things going on. Now, the first one is awfully niche, but it really pissed a lot of game developers off, myself included, and that is when they dumped or deprecated support for OpenGL. As of right now, iOS and macOS no longer support the open standard OpenGL. In fact, they don't even support the replacement, Vulkan. They have their own proprietary solution, Metal. There are solutions to get Vulkan working on Metal, but that was nothing to do with Apple. Basically, they just made it so that if a game developer wants to use open technologies to develop their game on Apple platforms, tough. And yeah, that wasn't really a great move. And then what they did later on in the year is the notarization thing. So if you're an open source thing, suddenly you're forking out $100 a year to keep your software running on Apple machines. I mean, we can get into the whole Catalina operating system and all of the woes that came with it, not to mention some of their recent hardware faults. But let's just say they weren't really making a lot of friends the last little while. But this week, wow, did they crank it up to 11. In fact, they cranked it up so high that this is going on. We're seeing headlines like antitrust scrutiny, and then we're seeing congressmen start talking about this. So the first one we've got going on earlier this week, and honestly, I am 100% behind this one. I do think these walled gardens have to be knocked down, and not just Apple's, but Apple is the most egregious offender in this area. And basically, they are under a series of EU antitrust complaints against the Apple App Store. This is all leading once again into WWDC, their developer conference, where they're trying to convince developers, hey, our platforms are great and you should develop there. And you probably know right now, if you sell an app on the App Store, there's a 30% commission. So if your app is $1, they make 30 cents off of it. And I don't think too many people are complaining about that. Like the rate is pretty bloody steep. I don't think too many people are arguing with that. The actual costs versus return on that, Apple is making a killing there. But it's when you start getting into subscriptions that it starts getting really, really iffy. So let's say you're running Netflix, and you're selling a product on there, you owe 30% of your Netflix subscription to Apple just because that person signed up using an Apple app. That is insane. That's kind of like your ISP charging you to go to websites because you used their pipes to do so. And I think more and more companies are getting sick of this. And what we've gotten recently is Rakuten. Rakuten used to be Ebates. They're the ones that allow you to basically save a whole lot of money about stuff around your home. They're trying to get a 30% commission on ebooks sold through the App Store, but at the same time, their own services such as Apple Books don't have that 30% tax. This also applies to an ongoing complaint right now from Spotify. Same deal. Spotify is claiming that Apple uses its App Store to stifle innovation and limit consumer choice. Well, Apple Music service doesn't pay the Apple tax there. So anybody that's competing with an Apple product on Apple's platform pays 30% of everything to Apple, where of course Apple's own stuff doesn't do that. And not only that, but we've also got Apple is being accused of, and this is really familiar to what Microsoft did in the past, they're using private SDKs and APIs to make their own applications better. And Microsoft got in a whole lot of trouble for that years ago, and basically they are doing the exact same thing. So this 30% cut, nothing new. Netflix and Spotify have both fought against it for years. They're saying it goes towards the cost of maintaining the App Store and enforcing its content. Again, if it costs 30% to maintain their store, they are doing something seriously wrong. But unfortunately, that 30% number is pretty standard. It's what the normal take is on Steam. It's what it is on the App Store. I think it is basically on the Google Play Store. Although, with almost all of those platforms, if you're a big player, you can get a bit of a break. But that's still not that great either. But the weird thing is, it allows things like Amazon Prime Video to bypass the standard 30% fee when selling individual movies and TV show rentals. So there's a weird set of rules here, but straight up, they are being investigated for their antitrust behavior. In the EU, let's just say, traditionally tends to find against American companies. I'm not saying there's an inherent bias there, but when it comes to antitrust cases in the EU almost always rules against the company. And so Apple should take this very, very, very seriously. But the kicker is, it ain't just in Europe. We've got right now in the US, same time, 30% is unconscionable, says Congressman David Cicilline, basically joined along with Basecamp CTO, we're going to get back to that one in a second, to discuss the plight of Hey Basecamp's new $99 a year email service. Earlier this week revealed that Apple had rejected Hey iPhone app from the App Store because it didn't offer any way to sign up and pay in the app itself, which is how they would make their 30% cut. What this instead did is did exactly what, remember Kindle did this ages ago. It used to be on a Kindle. You wanted to buy a book from Amazon, you would have to go to the Kindle website, and then it would download, then it would sync it back to the, I don't know why that all changed, but that's how they basically used to do an end round against the 30% tax from Amazon. Now, for some reason, that doesn't work for Hey. And the kicker is, they didn't do this on the original app. They did it when they released a patch for to fix bugs and to do extra security and such. And they did this in the most mafia-style way. So you've got congressmen in the U.S. investigating, you got EU looking at them for antitrust, and then again, coming up to the WWDC, we have some horrible communications. So what we've got here, this is DHH, which, by the way, if you look at this profile, the dude, first off, created Ruby on Rails, founder and CTO of Basecamp, and just for fun, he's also a Le Mans 24-hour class-winning racing driver. Yeah, okay. So anyways, he's doing the feedback on this about the whole interaction that they're having with Apple, and this has really got legs. People are really looking at this and talking about what they're doing here, but the worst part is, in the initial complaint, if we go all the way back down here to when it was rejected, it's pretty insane. This particular rejection letter, we're going to switch on over to that next. So here we go. This is part of what Apple sent back to them, and this isn't when they did their 1.0 release. This is when they did their 1.0.1 service release. They basically came back and said, this isn't an email app. It's not selling as it is because it can't be used without a subscription, which is BS. Everybody has, like, there's all kinds of apps that are only effective without a subscription. The only thing here is that Apple isn't directly getting their cut because you've got to go to the Basecamp website to sign up for the service. And then we get into, and this really rubbed people the wrong way. Thank you for being an iOS app developer. We understand that Basecamp has developed a number of apps and many subsequent versions for the Apple Store for many years, and the App Store has distributed millions of these apps to iOS users. These apps do not offer in-app purchases and consequently have not contributed any revenue to the App Store over the last 8 years. We are happy to continue to support you in your app businesses and offer you solutions to provide your services for free, so long as you follow and respect the App Store review guidelines and terms that all developers must follow. So if you're reading that one and you're, say, I don't know, an open source app distributor who obviously you're not making any money for yourself, but you're certainly not making any money directly for the App Store, you might look at that comment and go, wait a minute, Apple doesn't want me, do they? And that's kind of exactly what they just said. They just basically told Basecamp to go piss off because you're not making us money directly. Come back and talk when you've got in-app purchases that we can profit off of. That is not a good look. That is not a good look at all. And yeah. It's also kind of massively overlooking one thing, and this is one of the things that Basecamp brought up, is we've sold these things that make your platforms, your often overpriced hardware, appealing. We bring developers to your ecosystem. We bring tools to your ecosystem. We make your apps, your hardware, your various different services more appealing by providing our software on it. And I get that argument 100%. The same way as if all the GNU stuff went away, if the GCC compiler, obviously they don't pay any in-app purchases from GCC or various different open source projects, Krita, Blender, none of those contribute anything to the bottom line. But if they weren't on Apple platforms, that would be one reason less to use Apple platforms, and thus you're not making money off of your overpriced hardware sales. This is a really big slap in the face comment. I can understand 100% why Basecamp are upset about this. And the kicker is, basically his response is, I'm going to burn the company to the ground before I give into this demand. So it's going to be interesting to see how far this fight goes. And again, this is coming up right in advance of the Worldwide Developer Conference, where they are trying to convince developers, hey, we're your friends. And you're sure not looking like our friends right now, Apple. And I know a lot of people in the game development community, especially in open source game development. You got a lot of guys on the Godot team basically saying, why do we support this platform anymore? What's the point? They're so hostile to us. And this ain't going to help. This is certainly not going to help. And the kicker is, I guess going back in time 3 years ago, 4 years ago, I would go into a coffee shop or I would go to a meetup, and I would say 75-80% of developers were using Apple hardware. They were the darling of the indie developer community. When you keep pissing away goodwill like this, that ain't going to keep happening. And I've already seen that. I've seen a lot of people moving away from the Apple platforms. And I think if they keep this stuff up, you're going to keep seeing more. And the argument of walled gardens, this is basically kind of why the Epic Store was launched. And I understand what people, once you've fully invested in such a garden, you kind of want it to do well because all of your previous purchases are there or whatever. But they are anti-competitive, they are monopolistic, and they are being exploited and abused, especially in Apple's case, where Apple is bringing competing products to market, their bookstore, their video stores, their music stores, etc., and they're not playing by the same rules as the developers on the platform. That is exactly what Microsoft got charged billions of dollars for in the past, and I almost guarantee you that's what the EU is going to do here. Interesting week for Apple and Apple developers. Not a great one, and again, worst timing ever when they're going into WWDC. Going to be interesting to see what comments come of it. But to the Basecamp group, good luck. You're fighting the good fight, and I hope you win. That's it for now. Talk to you all later. Goodbye.